This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Goulot.
I'm David McDonald.
And I'm Sam Merciers.
And this week we're joined by RighteousGIRLS. It's Erica Dohe and Gina Izo. Thanks, girls, for coming on the show.
Glad to be here.
Your new album, which is called Gathering Blue, is coming out July 10th on New Focus Recordings. We're going to be playing a few clips from the album in the episode, but I just wanted to ask, just to get us started, this album has so many different composers it looks like you collaborated on with, and I'm just curious, how did you sort of gather everyone together for this one project? It's kind of incredible.
It's been a pretty long process, and the collection of composers that are presented on the album we've really gotten to know individually over the course of the 10 years that we've both been in New York.
So we see like Andy Akiho is on here.
Friend of the show.
Yeah, he's been on here. A whole other, like a slew of people, Pascal Leboeuf, Vijay Iyer, and the promo video that you guys have up, it looks really cool. It sounds like the recording session, like for all of this, I don't know how long it took for all of these pieces, but it looks like you just were pretty much having fun the whole time.
We spent 2 days in the studio, one full day out at Brooklyn recording with Andy Taub, who was the recording engineer, and another day, a couple months after that, we recorded up at Octaven Audio in Yonkers with Ryan Strieber, who was engineering that session.
Great. And so, since this is, you are a, I mean, I guess it would be proper to call you a piano flute duo of sorts, I could say. What was the I don't know, the message that you're trying to convey with this album? Like, what is the theme? What were you trying to do with Gathering Blue?
It was the idea was that like Gina said, over the few years we gathered all the music materials in New York City, and in a way combining them in our own language, and in a way like a genre blurring music coming from jazz and coming from classical, contemporary, and electronic music.
Yeah, that's something that we were discussing before the show. The collection of influences in the music is vast. There's a lot of stuff in there. Sam was commenting earlier that the Andy Akiho track could almost be a Bjork tune, and there are other things in there that are, you know, a pretty straight, you know, descendant of Boulez or anybody else in contemporary classical language. It's a really wonderful mix, and they all come together really well. And so I'm wondering how you think of those genres as all a part of your repertoire.
I think it's not as much that we set out to do something with this album. It has been kind of it's evolved in its own way by, you know, us working really closely with each of the composers and pulling, you know, different sounds that we use as a duo into the sounds that they have in their voices. So I think more naturally the album was able to, you know, develop by us, you know, putting our take on whatever the composers are saying on their own as well.
I'm wondering what you think about, like, had you ever had a studio experience like this when it comes to making your recording? Because to me, like, when I hear these pieces, I think of, like, you know, Magical Mystery Tour or OK Computer or Kid A. I'm thinking about, like, things being created in a studio, which is not necessarily something that people think of when they think of, air quotes, classical music. What do you think about the experience of creating music this way and its sort of place in the, you know, classical music, chamber music world?
I think we took a very, I mean, this was the first time I think either one of us had really dove into the recording process in this way. A lot of the recordings we've done in the past have been in really large spaces, you know, whether it's a church or a big hall or something that's less intimate as the studios that we recorded this album in. So I think it's the first time, you know, we went in and really we had separation. We were both in individual booths for some of it. We had close miking and we did a lot of layering. So we were, you know, playing over our own tracks and then going in and working with, you know, a mixing engineer and a mastering engineer and kind of reshaping some of the pieces even after the initial recording had taken place. So I think this was a much larger endeavor for us as far as recording goes.
So how much of the compositions were actually shaped in the recording studio? Because I think this is what Sam might be getting at, is that the process is a very like rock music process where you have maybe some ideas when you go into the studio, but the compositions are really formed while you're in the room making the noises.
Right.
Because the piece is the recording, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah, especially.
I'm curious, like where that where that intersection is. How much had you prepared beforehand, and then how much was more or less spontaneous in the studio?
I mean, I think for some of the tracks, we are just improvising. So that is all taking place in real time. You know, we improvise a lot outside of the studio with each other and in performances, and so it was really great to see, you know, what had taken place on that day at that specific time, alongside, you know, the improvisers we have being Ambrose Akinmusuri, Justin Brown, and Andy Apio, who are all improvising over these tunes with us.
So is the experience of like performing these works live and then what you hear on the album, is that like a completely different, like with what took place with post-production and mastering of the CD?
Well, in terms of the improvisation, I wouldn't say it's that different, although in improvising in a live performance, you can take the audience's energy, and you know it's quite different. But I think we try to replicate that improvisation in the recording as well as much as possible. But it was weird because we had 10 tracks of BJ's tracks, and that BJ's tracks is mostly improvised, and all 10 sounded very different, obviously. And it was hard to pick one because they're all different.
Yeah. Did you guys, this is just a quick aside, but if you ever read that article by Jeremy Dank in a New Yorker like a couple years ago, he was talking about the recording process and how like you just get so nitpicky about these sorts of things, and you hear one take and one take and one take and one take, and one that when you first start out is like, no, definitely not that one. Then the producer will like slide it in later, and you'll be like, oh, I kind of like that one, and then he lets you know, oh yeah, actually that was the one you said you would never ever use.
I mean, I'm not sure that there's one that we said we would never ever use that we ended up using. However, yeah, it was difficult. And the more we listened, and we listened quite a bit immediately following the session, and then we stepped away from it for a little while, and it was quite different going back the second time. And I think we ended up liking other tracks that initially we hadn't after we let it sink in a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Huh.
It's like a never-ending process.
So maybe we should play a little bit of the recording for people. We've mentioned Vijay and Pascal a couple of times, so I want to definitely play those. And I want to start with the first track on the album, Girls. And you mentioned in the notes to the album that this actually includes some bits of Vijay Iyer's piece later. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about this piece and how those two came together in this track.
Sure. Our producer, Pascal, who composed the first track on this, he also has quite a background in electronic music and remixing, and so what he thought would be great to intro the album was to pull a part of the improvisation from VJs with, the loud drum crashes to intro the album, and then to segue from there with some added effects like reverse audio into the opening track, Girls. And this kind of continues throughout the album with the interludes, where he pulled different sounds from different pieces and then layered them, and we improvised around some of it to kind of thread the album together and foreshadow some of the tracks and look back on some of the others.
Cool. Well, this is an excerpt from Pascal Leboeuf's Girls. Not it. I pressed the wrong button. This is an excerpt from Pascal Leboeuf's Girls.
That was Patrick Gullo's
That was Patrick Gullo's noise sort of thing. Here's the real button. This is the right button this time. That's, by the way, that's totally staying in. That was an excerpt from Pascal Leboeuf's Girls by our guests, Righteous Girls. Actually, the piece is by Pascal Leboeuf. The performance is by the Righteous Girls. Tell
me that wouldn't kill at Bonnaroo. Absolutely would kill at Bonnaroo.
The drum and the piano are like kind of glitchy, and then the flute just drives right through it. Just drives the truck right through everything. Doesn't have any hesitation, but everybody else is not quite sure.
What is the time signature situation going on there?
Oh, ask the nerd question.
Well, I'm serious.
It's a mixture of the compound and
Yeah. Well,
17/8 or something like that.
Okay.
You just fall into the groove and then go with it.
Yeah.
So when I listen to stuff on this album, there's like sort of a thought experiment I have, and the guys can tell you I am a huge fan of Radiohead, so that's the example I'm using. I hear things that they do on albums, and it's always a good conglomeration of like technical skill, as a performer mixed with post-production to create this sound. And then I have this thought experiment: how are they going to make that happen live? I wonder if you guys have had the experience where you're like, man, this is so groovy. We're rock stars. We made this sound. How are we going to do this when it's when we're on stage? And do you have anything to say about that experience?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think trying to recreate the same sound that you can produce when you're kind of remixing your own album or adding effects like that has been something that has been an ongoing process for us, and we've really had to kind of dive deep to see how we can get those sounds in the live setting. For me, I perform always, whether it's more on the classical contemporary side of things, I always perform with a pickup on my flute, and I run the pickup through a series of guitar pedals or effects pedals to be able to create that kind of long reverberous sound that you hear on a lot of the album's tracks. And I also often use a delay pedal and things like that to be able to get that same kind of sound in the live performance.
What draws you to using those kinds of technologies?
That originated, I guess we've been playing together for about 4 or 5 years now, and originally we had performed more in these big reverberous concert halls. And I think when we started playing more contemporary music, we would go into these spaces in New York City that kind of had not as reverberous a sound. The rooms were very dry. They usually had bars in them, or people, more restaurant setting or club kind of setting. And I really didn't like the sound I was getting on the flute. So I started off with just a microphone, and then later added a little bit of reverb just to try to create the concert hall kind of sound. And then I think I got really into it, and I started adding more and more of the reverb and more pedals. So
You're losing the primary benefit of playing the flute is that you don't have to carry a lot of stuff with you. You've now gotten rid of all of that, and now you have to carry, I'm sure, a roller cart of crap every time you play now.
I usually have quite a large suitcase with me, and generally my own amp that I carry along with that. So.
See, whereas Erica can just show up and everything's all set. Oh, okay, it's piano.
Well, my problem is I'm in love with Fender Rhodes.
Oh.
Those things are
got some gear
very.
to bring too.
I was in a jam band that had a Fender Rhodes, and those things are very heavy. Just be forewarned.
I attempted one time to move one on my own, and it was a very slow process.
Actually, Gina, I wonder if you've had. I played in a jam band where I played saxophone with lots of effects pedals, and to me, the experience was I was able to stop being just the saxophone player, if that makes any sense. When you're in a jam band with guitar and bass and drums and all that stuff, and you're the sax player, it's like if you're playing a saxophone solo is the way the sound guy thinks of it.
Right.
And when I started playing with lots of effects pedals, my role in the band was able to change a lot. I can be a middle ground texture that doesn't do anything exciting but adds something very interesting. Instead of oh, the flute is playing, it must be a flute solo. You know what I mean? Have you experienced anything of such as that?
Yes, actually. More so this past year, we've done a couple of sets or pieces, improvisations where I actually don't play the flute at all, and I use my my microphone to act more as a percussion instrument, or I pick up a lot of what Erica does when she's improvising, and I feed it through the microphone to go back into the audience, and then it comes back around, and it gets to be this kind of layered effect more so of Erica and her improv and the sounds that I'm adding to whatever she's doing at that time. But generally, I stay away from even adding the flute sound into that kind of setting. And so it's been a cool process kind of gathering different sounds to improvise with aside from the flute.
Yeah. A lot of expectations from the audience's side kick in as soon as they hear a flute sound or a saxophone sound or whatever, and sometimes you want to avoid those altogether.
I always think of Careless Whisper whenever I hear a saxophone.
Of course. I'm wondering about piano preparations too, because in the album we hear some, not extensive, but some, obviously there's something in there in the strings. Yeah. Do you have a goodie bag you carry around for gigs that's
definitely. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you do anything extensive, or is it pretty simple stuff?
I don't know if it's extensive. Majority of the preparation I do is magnets and blue tags, and that's that usually takes care of the sounds. If I want to go farther, I usually put nails. But a lot of venues don't even want to see that in the piano.
Right, absolutely.
Bring out the nails, and they're like, "What are you doing?"
I think it'd be a good experiment to try and figure out the best way to get the best sound with keeping the stage manager or whatever it is the happiest, There
was one concert, I should say, where we were actually on stage performing one of Andy Akio's pieces, and Erica had placed her sheet music on top of the strings.
Yeah.
And the sound engineer came down from his booth and actually came on stage thinking her music had accidentally fallen into the piano and went to take it out.
Yeah, in the live setting.
So
yeah,
it was pretty hilarious. I hadn't, I didn't understand what was going on at the time, and I look over and he's just taking her music out of the piano. So
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I had to yell and I had to be like, no, that I meant that.
But we kept going.
Yeah, we kept going.
That's good. The show must go on.
Actually, Andy's character and I in
Yeah.
the album. So it's like if I stopped, then the music would have stopped. Yeah.
So it was another added effect. So
Very nice. It became a little bit performance arty.
yes.
Yeah.
So you guys are doing a tour in support of the album,
Yeah.
and how far and wide is that going to range?
Well, right now we have set up the release event is taking place at Joe's Pub on August 7th. And then immediately following that, we're going to leave the next morning and we're going out to Washington, D.C. And we're going to play at Atlas Performing Arts out there. This tour is mainly East Coast. So we are staying between Washington, D.C., Baltimore. We're going down to North Carolina. And then following that, we're arranging a trip out to Japan, where Eric.
Cool.
Cool.
Are there plans to make recordings of some of the dates or anything like that?
The live recording?
Yeah.
At this point, I don't believe we have that set up, but it might be possible.
Yeah, it is possible.
Well, just in reference to the live versus album idea, that I would love to hear it. So anything you can do, I'd appreciate it.
Joe's Pub, the release event, will definitely be recorded in a
Excellent.
public video, so that will be up on YouTube, I'm sure, eventually.
Excellent.
But yeah, lots of stuff, changes with the live setting on stage, so you get a very different feel for what we're doing.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we haven't talked a ton about yet, we've talked about your collaborations with other composers, but we haven't talked a lot about your collaborations with other musicians in the studio and bringing in other sounds outside of flute, piano, and obviously electronics that we discussed. And a lot of the tracks on this album include contributions from other musicians, and you mentioned a few of them. But some of our favorite musicians as well. We mentioned Andy Akio earlier. I grew up playing trumpet. I'm a huge Terrence Blanchard fan. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences working with these other players on this album?
Sure. Do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. Amber's chemistry. I met him in Banff Jazz Workshop 2 years ago. He was the faculty there, and I got to do a duo improvise set with him, and yeah, we kind of immediately bonded. Of course, I love his playing. Then we kept in touch after that, and we asked him to commission him a piece.
I guess I had worked with. I knew of Ambrose, and I had been listening to his album, his first album, for quite some time, and I knew him just from the New York City kind of jazz contemporary scene. But I actually received a phone call from him about a week before his pre-release show for Imagine Savior at the Jazz Standard, and he had written 2 pieces for flute, and he needed a flutist to go over the parts with him. So I actually went to those rehearsals and looked over the parts, and we went back and forth with some ideas from what he had written. And he invited me from there to play on the pre-release show at the Standard. So I was there with him on that final evening of his residency there. And I think after that, he didn't realize at the time that Erica and I knew each other and had a group together. And so, he showed interest in working with both of us as a duo. And so, and had a lot more interest writing more for the flute, which he had been experimenting with at that time. So
when you start these collaborations, are you starting them from the perspective of working with a composer who happens to play, or are you starting them from the point of an improvisation with another player that kind of just grows into a piece?
I think it changes per composer, I would say. Someone like Andy Akio, we knew his music and his compositions more so than we knew him as an improviser, but he also is stemming from a background of improvisation. And so I think in certain cases we've approached people because we know them as performers, but in other cases, we just know their music and approach them from a composer standpoint. So it's a big mix.
I want to play a couple of these other collaborative tracks that we have, and I think we can just play them both because they're both really great. First, I want to listen to, and this is a track that we mentioned earlier, "Accumulated Gestures" by Vijay Iyer, and this is the track that you specifically mention has pieces pulled into Girls that we listened to earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else to add to set up this track, "Accumulated Gestures"?
No, I mean this piece acts. It's really a lead sheet that BJ had written, and he kind of gave us some guidance points for the improv section, but it was left very open. He gave us talking, walking, and breathing as points of reference, and said, between the duo and Justin Brown, who's joining us on this track, to try to stay, as try to each kind of take on one of those roles, and then as they change, take on a different role, so that you're not all talking at the same time, or you're not all breathing at the same time. So that's the kind of approach we took on this one. And
it's really interesting to think of. I mean, breathing as the flute player seems pretty, a pretty, not much of a stretch. But breathing as the pianist or the drummer, I think, is an interesting kind of challenge to express those ideas.
Right. So we kind of all had to think about how many different ways can I breathe on this instrument, and what can I pull into the mix, at the time when we don't know what the next person is going to be doing. So.
Yeah, very cool. So this is "Accumulated Gestures" by Vijay Iyer with Righteous Girls and Justin Brown. That was an excerpt from "Accumulated Gestures," improvisation. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I think you could totally get away with some spoken word behind that.
What spoken word would you want to put in there, Patrick?
I don't know. Some not sure. The poetry of someone, I guess. But like you can put a beret on and like step into a 1960s poetry reading or something. It'd be perfect for that.
To me, that piece talks to the idea of creating pieces in this context where it's not so much about the composer with a capital C, but like the producer is sort of like the composer, because that's really just based on you guys being able to create something interesting and a really good drum set player who's able to create a lot of feel, and you realize, oh, these things work together, so let's record it and it'll sound cool, and it did. And it's sort of like in an environment where you realize, oh, we're able to do this because we've got this awesome drum set player who can pull this kind of inflection off, and while you're in the studio, you just harness that thing that you have in front of you, and that's very interesting. It's a way that classical music is just learning to embrace the recording process, I think. Instead of trying to create just like this perfect rendition of what it would sound like if it were played on stage, thinking of, let's create something using the studio instead.
It sounds like you're listening really hard in there.
Yeah, we are listening. Yeah, that's the only thing you can hold on to in open improvisation like this.
I have to say, Justin Brown had so much energy that day in the studio that I think we both just fed off, the drive that he had, especially in the track that we chose to go with. We did a lot of other takes, and they did sound very different, but I think this one was taken from one of the later takes. Yeah. And at that point, we were all just, driving with everything. Yeah. So
we did about 10 takes on this. Yeah.
That's I think goes back to what Sam was saying. Like that to me is something that makes or is going to make the performances on your tour so special.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Are you going to be able to do things like this that have the other players on the tour?
Are we going to have the guest artists on the tour?
Well, yeah. or even if you don't have them, are you going to still find a way to put these pieces together?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All of them can be done as duo, but I think the great thing about a lot of these works is we can include other artists as well on these tracks. So we've done, we've included a lot of other guests on our shows and a lot of other improvisers and things like that. So this music tends to be a little bit more open, so we have that flexibility, which is nice.
Very cool.
So I want to play one more clip from the album that has the collaboration with another player on it, and this is Andy Kehoe's track, and this is a composed piece, right? This is not as open as the last one we listened to. All right? Or no, is there maybe I'm wrong.
It is composed. It was originally composed for solo steel pan, actually. And we liked it so much that we asked Andy's permission to do our own take on it. And he said, I absolutely trust you, go ahead. So,
you did a cover. You did a cover of it.
So it is our cover, but you're going to hear Erica, the piano is prepared, and she, went back and forth with Andy and made decisions about what she wanted to do. So, and then because I am not a percussionist, I had the flexibility. The flute allows you to do more legato stuff than the steel pan is able to do, so I was able to kind of
drop a marker here in audition.
Internet.
That's unfortunate because this is probably my favorite track on the album.
So are they frozen for everybody else now?
Yes.
Okay. At the very beginning, everything froze, and then I didn't.
Well, then I think I'll just blame you.
Okay. What's interesting? When my screen was frozen, I swear my mouth was like this. Somehow, in normal speech pattern conversation, I had managed something along this line. So we're taking my dad to Crawfish Springs in Chickamauga, Georgia. It's an interesting place.
They Crawdaddy.
No, it's properly named Crawfish. There's government manufactured plaques and shit that say it.
Chickamauga, that's a good English name right there.
Chickamauga. I think that's an Indian name.
Yeah.
I think that's an American name.
I know.
Battle of Chickamauga was like a big thing in the Civil War. So there's lots of like Civil War tourism in this area.
Is there a lot of Confederate flag?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, it's not
It is the
like
flag of traitors.
you don't see them everywhere. Oh, looks like we got them back.
Hello?
Are we back?
Hello.
We're back.
So I have a quick question. Did you guys like monologue for a while before you realized the call was dead? Don't you hate that when you're on the phone and you say something super profound and you're like, oh shit, that person didn't hear anything I just said.
We kind of waited.
Yeah,
patiently.
I'm not sure when we got off. I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
so tell us again about this process of working with Andy.
Oh, you're talking about character and I.
Where did we leave off? I had briefly described the use of the prepared piano, and was that all in there?
we got the stuff about the prepared piano.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think just other than Eric and my sounds, Andy took his written score and he just improvised around what you wrote. So you're gonna hear that, and Pascal, the producer, our producer, he kind of introed it later with some steel pan rolls that Andy had recorded. So that was actually done after the process. So you'll hear at the beginning, some added steel pan effect that Pascal had went in and put there.
Awesome.
Oh, this is an excerpt from Andy. Well, you know what? I will let you say the title of this piece because I'm not gonna try.
Okay.
This is a piece by Andy Kehoe that is called
Karakurenai.
Well Said. That was an excerpt from Andy Kehoe's Karakur Inai on Gathering Blue, Righteous Girls. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's a really great example of some of the things that you get to do creating the recording in the studio and creating the piece in the studio. Pan has so many cool, beautiful, really high overtones. It's really rich in overtones, and so you get to really play around with some of this and shape the sound with it, I think, more than some other instruments. And it was a little bit of some like filter sweep stuff going on subtly at the beginning of that that I thought was a really cool effect on Pan in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Man, I could listen to that like when it's good when I'm like, oh, you're pausing. Like, that's really good stuff.
Well, they need to buy the album when it comes out.
Absolutely.
We're big fans of Andy's music and always have been. So it was really great getting to collaborate with him in this way, especially in an improvised setting with him.
Yeah. He's a nice guy, too. What a humble guy.
Yeah.
And a MacArthur genius now, too.
Did you get one of those?
A Rome Prize.
Oh, Rome Prize.
Maybe soon to be MacArthur's.
Where can people find out more about what you guys have going on?
I mean, people want more information. There's our website, RighteousGIRLS.com. We're on Twitter and we're on Facebook at RighteousGIRLS. And for information about the CD release event, that can be found either on our website or through the Joe's Pub website.
We will have lots of useful links regarding the Righteous Girls and their upcoming shows in our show notes.
And we have a video, too, that's soon going to be released of Pascal's opening track. So we were privileged to work with New Music USA, who generously supported that project. And we went, I think it was in April, we went with Pascal and a wonderful videographer, Michael McQuilkin, to this beautiful apartment above Columbus Circle, and we were able to make the video just as the sun was going down over Manhattan, and you'll be able to see how all those prepared sounds were created, and you'll get to view Erica playing piano with her elbows.
So is it how much of the video is just a video of a performance, and how much of it is kind of a creation of its own?
I mean, I think that there were a lot of steps involved. I mean, the videographer had his own, kind of artistic take on what he wanted to present and how he wanted to present it. And a lot of it is, really getting to show the audience how these sounds on the album were created and what went into the piano to make that happen. And how, you're able to view how I'm making these kind of extended sounds on the flute as well. So.
Well, and did you say when that was going to be available, or do you know?
Sure, but it should be releasing sometime around July 10. That release date, we believe. So, but we will let you know. And that information, will also be on our website and social media and stuff like that. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, both of you. It was really great talking to you this morning.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
So, people listening to this, you can find more about what's going on with Righteous Girls. We'll have links to all the things that we talked about today on our show notes. You can find those at soundnotion.tv/SN. And you can find links to all of that stuff. You can find links to our social media on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. You may already be watching this on YouTube. If you'd like to suggest a story or somebody that you'd like to hear us speak with, you can do that by tweeting at us or using hashtag SNWeekly. That's something we always check as we put the show together. You can subscribe to this show and all our shows in the iTunes store, and that would be really wonderful if you would do that. If you're feeling particularly generous, you can leave us a review there. As I always say, we will always read your 5-star reviews. So if you really hate the show, leave us a 5-star review and we'll read that. Otherwise, we're just going to ignore you. So thank you so much for listening or watching this week, and we will see you back next week.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. When is that Japan tour you were talking about? I'm actually think I might be making a trip to Japan later this year.
Oh, well, no, we don't have a date yet, but we're thinking of sometime in fall.
September?
Sometime, yeah, I think it would be more like October.
Oh, okay.
When are you going to be in Japan?
I haven't decided on the dates yet, but I've been meaning to go. So I was thinking more like towards the winter time though. So might not make it, but I'll try to make that Joe's Pub one though.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we'll send you an email. I'll send you a note when this is all up for download. It'll probably be late tonight or tomorrow. But yeah, thank you so much for talking to us. This is really great.
Yeah, thank you.
I really, really, honestly dig the album. I think it's fantastic.
Huge fan. of what you guys are doing. You should try and collaborate. This is the multiple time I've said this. Guys should try and collaborate with Corey Dargle. Could you imagine, like, you guys doing the musical background for a Corey Dargle tune?
Great. Well, we'll have to pitch it.
Yeah, huge fan. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you so much.
Cool.
Yeah, guys, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Oh.